And now, let me introduce today's speakers. First, Mark Levin is a certified financial planner, as well as a certified Medicaid planner, one of only two in the Chicago area. He helps families protect their assets from being spent down by home health care and nursing home costs. His course, It's Almost Never Too Late to Plan for Long-Term Care, explains how even couples and individuals who are on the brink of getting nursing care can at least prevent some of their savings from being lost. Along with Mark, Kate Curler is the founder and principal attorney at the law firm Office of Kate Curler. She focuses her law practice on elder law, something that should be of interest to all of us. Guardianship, probate, veterans benefits, Medicare and Medicaid benefits programs, review of nursing home and senior living contracts, and nursing home discharge defense. So with that, please welcome to the Tuesday Club, Mark Levin and Kate Curler.
Appreciate you guys coming up here today. It's a little bit warmer than we're used to, but you know, you got to be prepared for everything. So what I'd like to share with you, or I'd like you to think about is, imagine that you're 69 years old and your wife is 64 and you're in good health. You go bowling, you play tennis, you're involved with the community. And imagine the fact that you really never had any health issues, but over the last 5 years, you've had two sisters who've ended up in a nursing home. One of them ended up there after an extended bout of Alzheimer's. And the other one ended up there due to the fact that she had a series of strokes after taking care of the one who had Alzheimer's. So suddenly this begins changing your perspective. You begin thinking to yourself, well, if it could happen to my two older sisters, maybe this could happen to me. I mean, after all, you're only in good health until you are no longer in good health. So you approach your son, who's been urging you to get this kind of coverage for the last 5 years, and you tell him, you know, maybe you should start looking into some coverage, more on your mother than on me. I never could quite understand that because after all, he was the one who had two sisters in a nursing home, not her. So your son does the best job he can. He finds a plan that'll provide enough coverage for an affordable premium. That was my father 31 years ago. And I was a financial planner and insurance agent who helped find him that kind of coverage. Unfortunately, about 4 years after he purchased the coverage, my father was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. And 3 years after that, my mother was forced to admit him into a nursing home. As luck would have it, my father passed away within a month of going into the nursing home. So to say the least, they never felt a need to file a claim for long-term care since he was in there for such a short period of time. But the very fact that my father took the time and to actually buy coverage and give thought to that really impressed me and my sister and my mother. It's a hard thing to face up to, yet he was willing to face up to it, and he was willing to take the necessary action. And in two ways, I thought it was very important. Number one, it demonstrated the fact that my father was concerned about my mother. He did not want my mother to end up becoming sick and disabled just on the basis of taking care of him for up to 24 hours a day for 7 days a week. And in the second way, it impressed us in the sense that he decided that it made sense to buy some kind of insurance because in that way, he could protect up to about $150,000 of assets that could be used to support my mother, and that could be passed on to his children and his grandchildren. Now, keep in mind, this was close to 30 years ago. Today, to actually have the kind of purchasing power to buy $150,000 of services would take $500,000. So What my father did is he was actually brave enough to face up to the fact that even though he led a very productive life, and even though the fact that he was in good health, he was brave enough to face up to the fact that someday he really may need some care. And I got to congratulate all of you for coming here today, because in that way it shows me that you're also brave enough to face up to the fact that you too may need some care as well. But what I'm going to be asking you to do today is I'm going to be asking you to take the next step. And in a sense, I'm going to ask you to start giving some thought to how you could plan in advance for the day where you no longer can plan at all. I'm going to ask you to start giving some thought to strategies and a program that can help you protect your assets from being depleted by long-term care. And the good news is, for many of you who may consider yourself too old, or many of you who consider yourself to have too many pre-existing conditions, or have too little assets, or too much in assets, I'm going to offer you some ideas as to how you still can protect your assets from being depleted by long-term care, and at the same time, relieve your family of the stress of how to figure out how to provide you the care that you need once you need it. And that's why I title my program, It's Almost Never Too Late to Plan for Long-Term Care. Because in many ways, it is never too late. Of course, the sooner you plan, of course, the better. But there are still things that you could do, even if everyone else has told you that there's nothing you could do anymore. Okay. So I've already told you why I chose to make this my goal. But the thing I really want to focus more now on is the objectives of the program. We're going to talk about the consequences of not planning. We're going to talk about how to avoid a crisis by advanced planning, how to best handle a crisis, and of course, I look forward to all the questions that you have to ask. Okay, as you well may know, the cost of nursing care is not cheap. The average cost of care for a semi-private room is $76.77 a month. That is almost $92,000 a year. The average stay in a nursing home is currently 2.3 years. And the thing to keep in mind is that stay is 50% longer for women than it is for men. So because we know that the women are made of stronger stock, right? And so the average total cost is over $200,000. But in 10 years at 60% inflation, that cost will amount to over $371,000. And again, this is just for an average stay. The other thing to consider is the cost of home health care, which I learned quite a bit from on the basis of the care that my mother ultimately needed. My mother didn't want any home health care coverage. My mother didn't want a stranger living amongst her, okay? So as a result, we didn't get any home health care coverage. But unfortunately, my mother did need home health care a few months after she was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. And this was about 16 years ago. Now, I never thought that my mother of all people, was going to need 24-hour care for 7 days a week. But she did. And at that time, we got what we considered to be a deal. We found out a private individual who was a licensed practical nurse who was willing to provide her that kind of care. Again, keep in mind, this was 16 years ago, for about $12 an hour. But if you multiply $12 an hour by 24 hours, that comes out to $288 a day. And if you multiply that by if you multiply that by 7 days a week, that comes out over $2,000 a week. And over a course of a month, that's $8,000. And over the course of a year, it's close to $100,000. And this was 16 years ago. So now, of course, the cost of home health care has gone up considerably. The average cost per hour is currently $35 an hour. That's the average cost, okay? Per 6-hour day, that comes out to $210. Per 5-day week, again, this is only considering that you need 6 hours of care for 5 days a week, 30 hours, that comes out to $1,050. And for a year, that comes out to $54,600. Now, again, this is for 30 hours a week. Can anybody tell me how much 24-hour care today cost? Anybody willing to guess? Anyone who guesses, at least, yes?
I know of one that's 25
25 what?
an hour.
Okay, all right. But is that a person for
No agency, no.
no agency? Is she a licensed practical nurse, a registered nurse? Okay.
No,
See, it's not quite the same. See, we're talking about someone who provides skilled care. Anybody willing to venture a guess as to how much 24-hour care for 1 year now cost? Even on a monthly basis. Anyone who ventures a guess is eligible to win a lotto ticket. Okay.
96,000.
Nope. How much? Not yet. You're pretty close. You really are close. Anyone else willing to venture a guess? One more person?
Can I guess?
Go ahead.
In my experience, my clients pick 24-hour care is $11,000 to $14,000 a month
Okay.
times 12.
Okay. But you're not eligible. I'm sorry to disappoint you. You're not eligible
Oh, I'm
for a
not
lotto
winning
ticket.
anything. I'm just-
But you are, because you came really close. So here, it is $15,000 a month. So Katie was really close and you were really close too. Good luck. Let me know how it works out. Okay. Okay, there are a number of things you must know about long-term care. Okay, some of the things that you may have never been shared with you. There's a 68% chance that you will need long-term care during the rest of your lives. But what people really don't take into account is not only the financial cost, but the emotional and physical cost. Twice as many caregivers are reported as being in fear or poor health than non-caregivers. Okay. 30% of spouse caregivers ultimately die even before the ones that they're taking care of. Can you imagine? You're counting on your spouse, your loved one, to provide you the care that you need. And yet that spouse in and of himself may get so physically, emotionally drained, they may actually pass away before you do.
Sorry, can you move closer to the mic?
Yeah, okay. Okay, thank you. Okay, so the other thing to consider is what does Medicare cover? Medicare covers 20 days of skilled care in full only after a 3-day inpatient stay. And again, this is only assuming that they're doing more than an observation, that they're actually providing you some form of care. After the first 20 days, they'll cover all but $194.50 per day from the 21st through the 100th day. And most Medicare supplements will cover that cost. But after 100 days, you're pretty much on your own. Okay. As far as home health care is concerned, Medicare will only pay for medically necessary care in the home. Generally, that means following a period of time where you've been in the hospital. Let's say following a hip operation or knee replacement. So you really got to give some thought to really what you want. Most people will tell me what they want is assurance you will have access to quality care. Other people will tell me that they want to avoid having to depend on their family for care. Others will tell me that one of their secondary goals could be to preserve their financial independence. And finally, it is to pass their assets on to their family. Is there anything else that anyone could want out of a plan that would protect their assets from long-term care? Okay. So how can you pre-plan for long-term care? There are 4 different ways. One is for traditional long-term care insurance. One is hybrid single and limited premium life insurance. Another one is home health care coverage options. Another one is irrevocable Medicaid and funeral expense trust. And I'll go through them briefly. Keep in mind that this is the information that's being shared is only in my opinion or cited as source and or authority. I actually have made some footnotes on the presentation in regards to that. And second of all, we're not going to talk about any specific insurance products today. We're only talking about generic products. So whatever I'm talking about at this point, even the generic products, please do not take this as a recommendation. It's just simply to give you an idea of what is out there. Okay, the first thing is traditional lifetime pay long-term care insurance, which many of you may be familiar with. Many of you already may have purchased that kind of coverage within the last few years. This insurance provides immediate protection for less upfront money than almost any available asset vehicle. Okay, but there's some problems with this that some of you may have come across. Number one, they're basically use it or lose it. It's like auto insurance or homeowners insurance. You won't get paid any benefits at all unless you make a claim. And the second problem with it is the cost of insurance can go up if the state allows a carrier to increase their premiums on the basis of the amount of claims the insurance companies had in relationship to the premiums that they've collected. And back in the 90s and even in the early 2000s, a number of these insurance companies were increasing the premiums on people that already had it. And the sad thing is that in many cases, many people did exactly the opposite than what they should. Rather than going along with the increase, and again, it could have been it was a substantial increase. Many of them felt that maybe they couldn't afford the increased amount. Many of them ended up cutting back on their coverage in order to keep the premiums down. Now, that may not necessarily be the best thing to do. You bought the plan 10 years earlier, and the cost of care has gone up. And don't you think that now you're 10 years older, that the chances of you needing care sometime down the line are actually greater than they were when you bought it? Kind of works to the insurance company's advantage, doesn't it? So the good news is they haven't been increasing their premiums quite as much as they have in the past. But these premium increases still happen. And I recently had a client of mine who purchased coverage from me about 11 years ago. And he recently got notified that over the next 3 years, the insurance company is going to increasing his premiums by about 70%, which is about 22% per year. But fortunately, they purchased it at a time in which they could well afford it. And fortunately, they could still afford that kind of increase. Now, one of the good things about these plans currently is that if you buy it under certain circumstances, you will actually also be made available. You'll also be purchasing partnership protection from the state of Illinois. That does exist at this time. So in other words, if you bought a plan that provides you with $200,000 of coverage and you exhaust that $200,000 of coverage in the amount of claims, ultimately, again, if it met certain requirements in the state of Illinois, that plan will provide you protection for the last $200,000 that you actually own. So, and again, it's the last $200,000. So you would actually have to deplete all your assets until you got down to $200,000 before the state would actually step in and continue to pay for your care beyond that period of time. There's another option. That's hybrid life insurance with long-term care rider. Okay, that's a plan in which the insurance can be paid off in 1 to 10 years. A lot of people who are a little bit more affluent consider this to be the best option, because one of the nice things about this plan is it's not use it or lose it. This is a plan which, if you never make a claim to the insurance company, and you happen to die before you make the claim, at least your kids or your spouse can get back pretty close to what you paid in premium for the plan. And that would be in terms of tax-free life insurance. The drawback is that many people cannot afford to make the lump sum payment or payments over 10 years. Third option, one that many of you may not be familiar with, and could qualify for people who consider themselves to be non-insurable at this time, are home health care plans. And who facility, right? I mean, I told you about my mother. When push came to shove, my mother preferred getting the care in her home. She didn't even want to consider moving into a facility, even though a stranger was living amongst her. One option is a home health care service contract. Now, this is not life insurance. It'll pay for the custodial expenses for if you cannot perform the activities of daily living. And this is basically the services of a homemaker: cooking, cleaning, providing you with medication, helping you with bathing, dressing, shopping. It can pay for up to $250,000 of benefits over a 10-year period of time, but it's not perfect. But even though it's not perfect, it's better than nothing. Second program is short-term home care insurance. Now, at least this plan will provide primarily care, pay primarily for care under the circumstance if you medically need that care. It'll pay for skilled care. It'll pay for physical therapy up to 1 year. It also includes 60 days of service from a home health aide. Finally, there are Medicaid irrevocable trusts. They can be used to protect some of your assets, even if you're on the verge of being admitted to a facility. Again, it depends upon how much assets you have, depends upon how long you're going to need that care. And the income assets can be transferred to the trust. The drawback is that once the assets are transferred to the trust, the transfer is irrevocable. You do not have access to that principal. The second thing is if you want to protect your IRAs, don't count on this as being the right way to do it. Because in order for the assets of your IRAs to be transferred over into the trust, you're going to have to liquidate the IRAs. So you could retitle those assets under the trust name rather than under you as the owner of an individual retirement account. Finally, there are irrevocable funeral trusts, and they could protect up to $15,000 as creditors. So you have a limited amount of assets. That could certainly be a good way of protecting some of those assets. You would need to complete a 1 or 2 page application with the insurance carrier to qualify. There are no insurance, there are no medical questions you need to answer. And you could either pay for one lump sum for this, or by transferring the cash value from an existing policy or from another place. Now, I'm going to introduce you to Kate Curler. And Kate is going to talk to you about certain things that you may have not heard from elder law attorneys. Again, they can only do so much, but Kate can show you some ways as to how you can do more.
Can you hear me? Oh, yeah, that's that. Yeah, so I'm gonna set my timer because I got 10 minutes here. So what I did is I took my personal experience of watching my parents get sick and reaching out to attorneys and realizing that there was so much more that other attorneys could be doing. So I have a practice where I do a lot of elder law, probate, disability planning, but I also look at nursing home contracts. I look at senior living contracts, and I connect my clients with professional social workers and nurses in order to put a plan together for them. So, I think that I kind of take an holistic approach and I look at all different sides of what I can and should be doing for my clients. Mark asked me to go ahead and do a presentation here on long-term care and how to pay for those costs. And I actually had a personal experience with veterans benefits with this. Thank you. Oh, that's me. Veterans benefits. Okay. A lot of people don't know about this. Why don't you know about it? Because the government's not going to tell you about it. Because it's tax-free money that goes into your bank account. Obviously, kind of self-explanatory. You have to be a veteran. So there's four things four criteria you need to meet in order to be eligible for veterans benefits. The first one is you have to serve in the military. You have to be active duty for 90 days. You don't have to be in wartime. A lot of people misunderstand that. Unfortunately, what dates are that? Unfortunately, our country's been at war pretty much from December 7th, 1941 to date. And we did actually a few years ago, but she probably passed away. There was a Civil War widow that was actually on veterans benefits at one time. So you have to have served. I had one guy who got flu in boot camp and never made it out, so he wasn't able to get veterans benefits. You have to serve active duty for 90 days. You have to have a disability requirement. And the fun part about this is that the government considers that anybody over the age of 65 is disabled. That's insulting, but it works. So if you're over 65 and you served in the military, third thing is you have to meet the criteria for assets. For Medicaid, you got to be really poor, $2,000 and only a certain amount of income. For veterans benefits, you're allowed to keep a little bit more. You're allowed to keep your house, you're allowed to keep your car, you're allowed to keep a certain amount of income. And approximately, well, this is an exact number, but 138,489. Now, I got this from a government website. Doesn't mean that the government doesn't change this criteria, but let's say you can have between $100,000 and $140,000 in assets before you're eligible for veterans benefits. There's also a 3-year look back as opposed to the Medicaid 5-year look back. What that means is you can't have gifted away any of your assets within 3 years to be eligible for veterans benefits. The fourth criteria is, and it's not listed here, but the fourth criteria is you have to have medical bills. So you can't just get this money because you served your country and you want to have some extra funds in your pocket. You have to have medical bills, but these are medical bills such as a home care aid. Do you have expensive medications that you're on? Some reason that you can justify that you need the additional funds in veterans benefits. And it's like, again, it's tax-free income that is available to you. This is Lyle and Mary Stoddicker, my grandparents. They moved to the villages. They were pioneers of the villages in Florida. And I was able to use veterans benefits to change their care and their income considerably when they became 91 and 92. And Grandpa apologized to me because he said, quote, I didn't think we were going to. He thought they lived to be about 90. He had a plan, but then his plan fell apart. Grandma had them, as you can see, this is square dancing. Grandma signed them up for everything in the villages, swimming, tennis, golf, crafts, and square dancing, where she even sewed their little outfits. So it was so cute. But in the early 90s, it started to get sick and they called me and I flew down there and I tried to look at their finances and figure out what we were going to do. And what we did was they moved to assisted living, but they were running out of money. They didn't have enough money and they were still pretty healthy at the time that they moved. Neither of them was even using a walker. But with assisted living, the criteria for assisted living is a certain level of disability. And that certain level of disability was that grandma couldn't really make meals anymore. And she did have a level of Alzheimer's that had started. So what I was able to do, and you can see here the three steps. And again, these are approximate numbers. Not everybody's going to get these. But what I was able to do is supplement their income. So assisted living was about $5,000 a month. They were bringing in income, but then I was able to get them approximately $2,500 a month that just went into their bank account. Then I was able to sell their house. Well, because they were in one of the older houses in the villages, it was about $70,000 or $80,000 cash. So when they got down to a certain amount, I sold the house, I put it in the account, I stayed under the 140, and the money continued to come in. And actually, Grandpa passed away. A year later, Grandma passed away, but they actually had funds available upon their death. So that $2,500 a month for a lot of people, in particular the widow's benefit, for a lot of people, $1,300 a month is not going to keep you at home, or it's not going to make a big difference if you need a certain level of care, but it's something, or if you have expensive medications. But one place that I don't see it used enough is with assisted living, where at least for my grandparents, it can make the difference between them having enough funds to live during their lifetime and actually passing away with funds, which was completely unexpected because we were able to supplement their income with this money. So, and so there's a veteran with a spouse, them together, a veteran alone if their spouse is deceased or they've never married, and then a widow's benefit. Obviously, you need to be married to the veteran when they die. You can't divorce a veteran and then get veterans benefits. So if anybody needs to think about that. And I think you have to be married 10 years, but I'm not sure about that. That could be Social Security. But if anybody needs any information on that. Now, the other thing to remember is, unfortunately, what the veterans does is they don't allow people to charge clients for doing the applications. So there is sometimes some veterans planning you can do, and there's veterans trust, but most of the time in these cases, going to the VA and having the military guy there that does these forms every single day is how I do it and how I did it for my grandparents. So a lot of lawyers don't charge for this. Quite frankly, by law, they shouldn't be charging to do the actual application. But people like myself that do what I do, we should know about this and be able to factor it in when we're talking about what's the best care and the best affordable long-term care for our clients. The second thing that I wanted to talk about that a lot of people don't think about is senior living contracts or nursing home contracts. A lot of people, especially with nursing home contracts, they just sign them. They figure it's a part of the discharge from the hospital and they're going to go to rehab and they don't read them. In particular, there's senior living contracts. Some of the higher end places, you're giving these people $700,000, $800,000, and then they're deciding how you live and where you live for the rest of your life. So I can't necessarily push back and negotiate a lot of changes for you, but I really do feel that my clients need to know what they're signing away, what their options are, and some of the changes that maybe they can make when they're signing it, things to keep in mind that they don't want to be surprised about in the future. So a lot of times also the salespeople at the buildings, I'm not saying anything bad about them, but they don't read the contracts. They don't know what the contract says. So if grandma asks them, what about XYZ? They say whatever they've been told to say. And quite frankly, sometimes I don't find that in the contract. So things to look for in any of these contracts is who's signing it. If you're signing it for your mom, are you signing it? Are you signing away certain liabilities? And do you have the legal authority to do that? A lot of times that's where power of attorney documents come in. I don't want my clients touching their things for their mom unless they have the legal authority to do that. And that actually protects both parties. Who's also liable for payment? I have seen nursing home contracts where they've tried to sneak it in where the kids are liable for paying for the care. And I've actually seen I've saw it not in Cook County, but I've seen a case that somebody actually, the children got sued for $72,000 because they signed on to pay, then they didn't pay. So those provisions, if you contract for it, you contract for it. It's not necessarily any legal provision if your kids sign it, but they don't know what they're signing. Who makes decisions about moves to the higher level of care? Again, this is some of these bigger places, the continuity of care places where you go from their independent to assisted to nursing home. Sometimes by one of a spouse making that move, the two parties are separated. And that's not what they anticipated the day they signed that contract. So who's going to decide for you when you move to a different level of care? And do you need a physician or do you want a physician who will advocate for you? And is there ways, do you have an ability to pay for extra care to keep you at the level of care that you're in? And if so, how much and how long? Those are some of the things that people don't read, or they don't really, it's hard to read some of these contracts at times. How long will you get your money back if you move? A lot of people don't look at this. And I've had cases. So say you're in a facility and you're just not really happy with the care. You know, the administration changed or your health changed and you want to make a move. Some of these contracts say you'll get your money back in say 90 or 120 days. And again, we're talking about buy-ins of $700,000 and $800,000. If you don't get your money back until somebody else signs a contract for your unit, that means you don't have the money. And if you're going to go home and do 24-hour care and you can't access that, for a lot of people, that's the bulk of the money they have at that age, is that say that $700,000 or $800,000. And I've seen delays of from 6 months to 2 years from people getting that money. So you're depending on that facility and their salespeople to go ahead and hustle and get those places signed for, and so that you can get your funds back. And then you're going to need that money for your care. There's also limits on the legal liability of the facility. Again, a lot of these aren't, I can't do a lot of negotiation with that, but I am able to tweak some of the language at times so that if you're injured or if something happens to you while you're in that facility, you're not limited in your ability to sue them or to actually file a lawsuit. I always tell my clients never to sign arbitration contracts. A contract with arbitration, you always cross that out, and you can't be required to sign the arbitration clause in order to be to enter a facility and sign their contract. So those are just some of the things that a lot of attorneys don't know about, a lot of people don't factor in, which are veterans benefits, and just having somebody take a hard look at that contract and find out what it's going to cost you and how and where you're going to live the rest of your life and who makes those decisions. So, and I'll hand it back to Mark.
So when we're talking about crisis plans, you first have to consider the eligibility for Medicaid. Now, there are a number of non-financial requirements. You must show that you're a US citizen or qualified alien. You must show that you're age 65 or older, blind or disabled. You also must show that you're a resident of a Medicaid-approved facility, not just any facility, but a facility that accepts Medicaid. There are also a number of financial requirements involved. You must show that your income is below the cost of the facility. Most cases, it's not hard to find, is it? You must also show that your total countable assets are below the individual resource allowance, single person, or the community spouse resource allowance, married couple. Now, for a married couple, that is a residence that does not exceed $600,000 in value. And it's also $109,500 of assets in the state of Illinois. But for a single individual, the only amount of assets that are protected from Medicaid spend down are $2,000 of assets, $1,500 of cash value in a life insurance policy, a burial expense fund, some jewelry, and a car. That's it. Okay. There's also what they call a monthly maintenance needs allowance. And the monthly maintenance needs allowance means that as long as you could demonstrate that the income for the community spouse is below $2,739, that community spouse can receive some of the ill spouse's income, ensuring that the community spouse can continue to live comfortably. This is really critical, because one of the last things I'm sure you want to do if you're a community spouse, now that your spouse has been forced to move into a facility, is having to move out of your own home, right? You have enough on your plate. Again, as I said before, the community spouse asset allowance is $109,560. So what you could do is you could spend down your assets. Spend down means that you eliminate certain countable assets, preventing Medicaid eligibility. But you could not simply give away assets. You will be penalized if you give away those assets up to 60 months before you need care. So how can you spend down? You could spend down by paying off your mortgage and other debts. You could purchase or improve exempt assets, such as the home, the vehicle, the household furnishings. Or you could purchase, as I mentioned earlier, a funeral expense trust. So what if you really feel you have too many assets? Well, that's really not a problem, is it? Not if you handle this in the right way. What you can do is you could accelerate your Medicaid eligibility to pay for the high cost of the nursing home by converting the countable assets into income, by utilizing something that is called Medicaid compliant annuities. Now, Medicaid compliant annuities are single premium immediate annuities that contain no cash value and provide an income stream to the owner. Okay, and the owner can be the community spouse. Also, the Medicaid compliant annuity allows you to eliminate excess countable assets. Again, those countable assets being over and beyond $2,000 if you're single, or $109,500 if you're married, in addition to the home. So those assets can provide income. So those assets can provide income that the community spouse needs to remain in her own home, or he needs. Medicaid compliant annuities are irrevocable. They cannot be altered, revoked, or sold. They're not investments. They're just simply a tool that one could use to protect one's assets, so those assets can provide the income that the community spouse needs, or for that matter, can protect some assets. So some of the assets can ultimately be passed on to the patient's family. The maximum life is determined by the owner's Medicaid life expectancy, and it pays equal monthly payments during the term. In most cases, the state Medicaid agency must be named primary beneficiary, okay? Although if the owner dies before the full cost of care is paid for, then in that case, the secondary beneficiary, in that case, the wife or the other family members, will be able to receive the assets that have not been depleted. So there are a number of benefits of Medicaid compliant annuities. If I had a little bit more time, I could give you an example of how this works, but I'd rather give you the opportunity to ask me whatever questions you have at the end of the presentation, which is coming very soon. So one benefit is it allows you to transfer countable assets to the Medicaid compliant annuity, so you could qualify for care at a Medicaid approved facility, drastically reducing your out-of-pocket cost. Okay, and the cost of care at some of these facilities under Medicaid, again, depending upon your situation, may only be $2,000 out of pocket, not $8,000 to $10,000 out of pocket. Medicaid compliant annuity can then be used to provide your spouse with needed supplemental income. Remember? So if you have a spouse who is at home and collecting $1,200 of Social Security, those assets in the Medicaid compliant annuity could provide them with the balance that they could qualify for. So in that case, it would be an additional $1,539. And for an individual, the applicant can divest approximately half of their assets by making use of that portion of that 60-month look-back period. So a guaranteed wealth transfer can be made. However, in that case, the applicant must pay for care during whatever they deem is that penalty period. So two things I'd like to leave you with. Number one, while it's almost never too late to plan for long-term care, the financial and emotional costs for not planning in advance can be great. So the sooner you plan, the better. And the second thing that I want you to leave with you, and something maybe you haven't heard from other people in my field, is the sooner your kids plan, even better yet. Because keep in mind that your kids, who may only be in their 50s, can qualify for a lot more coverage than you, and for a much, much lower premium. And so as a result, the time for them to start looking at this is now when they're young and now that they're in good health. So do you have any questions?
Okay, I have a sort of a question or a story. A friend of mine was moved into a nursing home that accepts people who pay. It's Medicaid approved. And the reason she moved her there is because when she spends down, she will not have to leave. Every day they hire a caregiver for 4 hours to play cards with her to keep her mind sort of sharp and something to look forward to. Now, when I heard the story, I said to my daughter, that's where you've got to put me also, because I also have money and a house and they'll let me come in. And if I live too long, then I can just stay there on Medicaid. Is that true?
Yes, yeah, so, and that's why having, can you hear me?
So that my plan is really good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, you want to take care with the timing of it, but yes, when you're spending down your money on Medicaid, for Medicaid, and usually the facility will do that, home care aides, that's something that does count. That's good money to use. It's a good cost to use.
All I'm doing is trying to protect my daughter from having to pay anything. I'm
Yeah.
not trying to hang on to my assets.
Yeah, yeah. No, I understand that. Yeah, that's what Medicaid is for.
Okay.
You know.
Any other questions here? Nope.
And this is for Kate. Regarding veterans benefits.
Yeah.
Does that where you gave the requirement of 90 days of active duty?
Yeah.
And not involved in a war. I was a reservist for 6 months and then filled out a 6-year requirement. I know that I'm not eligible for VA medical benefits, but I am eligible for certain VA programs. For example, if I want to purchase land, I could do that through them. How does that affect what you were talking about, veterans benefits, in terms of this particular topic?
So the type of pension that I'm talking about is something called aid and attendance, which is the cash-free income. And in order to be eligible, you have to have, you would know it more than I do. What's the discharge? What's the discharge number, that form? When you get that official.
Oh, yeah,
discharge,
it's a DD
Yeah.
something or other.
Three something.
I've got
If
that.
you have one of those.
Yep.
You're eligible for an attendance, in my experience.
Okay.
That's one of the criteria of the documents that they send in.
Yeah, after the 6-year obligation was filled, then I got the DD thing.
Yeah, whatever that is.
Okay, that's Department of Defense.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Any other questions here?
So regarding the aid and attendance benefit also,
Mhm.
is there a eligibility for, if you apply, can the benefit be retroactive for some period of time?
That's a great question, because I was lucky with my grandparents. I went through.
Kate, excuse me, you need to get closer to a microphone. Sorry.
That's okay. I have this is better though. So that's a really good question. With my grandparents, I had it done by the VA in Florida, and they do it all day long. So it was approved like super fast, and they didn't have a lot of assets and there was no complications. But that's actually a really good question. And that's one of the downsides of VA benefits is you have to continue paying the bills until the money comes in. But when the money does come in, it is retroactive. There are agencies out there and they say that that's 7 months, that can be kind of considerable and a burden. And then you have to be careful about family members loaning them money and getting paid back. And I'm not crazy about kids touching their parents' money and all that, but there are also agencies out there, and I don't know of any that I would recommend, but I could research it for somebody if they wanted to. I know that there's also agencies out there that will loan money for a veteran until they get their retro. But I would be really careful about, interest rates and all that, and that those people are doing it in good faith. But yes, you're right. There can be a delay until it's accepted, but when it's accepted, the money will come in. So.
Hello. I had one question with respect, I couldn't quite understand about the Army Reserve, 6 years, 6 months, 6 years active, 6 months active duty, 6 years reserve.
Yeah.
What were you talking about? What benefits are available to that person?
So I didn't totally understand it either, but meaning that so there's the reserves when you leave the reserves, you get the same type of paperwork. There's a certain government form that you get when you're honorably discharged.
I got one. I think I got one of those. It's an
Yeah.
honorable discharge.
So it's a DD something form. Yes, DD
I
4214.
really don't know. I haven't looked at it in
Yeah.
25 years.
And so a lot of what these veterans, when they do the application, you obviously have to get that from the government, and that's a part of it. But yeah, so, it doesn't really, if you're in a branch of the military that gives you that form when you're discharged, so I'm assuming this covers the Coast Guard and, and such, so the reserve, that's something I actually really didn't know, is that any reservist or any person in the military that's honorably discharged and receives that form is eligible.
For what? It's a question.
90 days active duty. Yeah. Yeah. Like I said,
Okay,
there was
you're
a
in 6
gentleman
months,
who,
98.
yeah.
What are you eligible for?
So in the aid and attendance pension was what I was referring to. There's other benefits that you're also eligible for as a veteran. I don't have a laundry list of those. The VA could do a better job rattling those off. But the pension that I'm talking about, which is that tax-free cash that just goes in your bank account, that's called aid and attendance pension.
What were the requirements for that? Certain amount of assets or what?
Yeah, so there are 4 requirements. Number 1 is that you 90 days active service, honorably discharged. Number 2 is you're over this age of 65 or you're disabled. Third one is that you have medical bills that are eligible to be paid or medications that are eligible to be paid under the pension. And the fourth one is a means test, which is you have to be under a certain amount of assets.
Thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions here? The one here?
How many long-term care contracts are there available?
There are not nearly as many now as there was even 10 or 15 years ago. Okay, I'm sorry. There are not nearly, I gotta like lean in. I almost gotta eat the microphone. Okay, all right. So there are not nearly as many now as there was even 10 or 15 years ago, because a lot of insurance companies have, quite frankly, lost money on these contracts. There are a few, and there is one or two that I think do offer sufficient coverage for what many people would consider an affordable premium. But again, they're not nearly as many as there are. And this is one of the reasons why I went into some detail about the home health care plans. Number one, because it's what most people want. And number two, because in many cases, those plans can be affordable. And the third one, quite frankly, is that 80% of the people who do receive long-term care receive it at their home. That figure has gone up quite a bit over the last 20 or 25 years due to medical advancements. So that is at least something that's available. The other thing, of course, that is available that other companies are still offering quite a bit of are the hybrid long-term care life insurance plans. So if you do have a fair amount of assets that you could place, they're not really providing you income at this point, you don't necessarily think you're going to need it, then in that case, it may be worth considering a hybrid long-term care life insurance plan, at least for some limited amount of coverage. The other thing I'd like to bring up to you is that many of you may have already purchased long-term care insurance, and maybe those plans will still pay enough, but keep in mind the cost of long-term care has gone way, way up. When my parents purchased it, the average cost was about $100 a day. When my father needed it about 7 years ago, it was about $140 a day. Now, it's not uncommon to find a plan in which they're charging $3,000 or $4,000. No, I'm sorry, $300 or $400 a day. So even though you may have coverage, and again, it may cover maybe $150, $200, it may be worth considering another plan that could provide you with supplemental coverage. Yes? No, they cannot. No, they're non-cancelable. None of them can cancel. They could still raise the premiums. Huh?
They can raise it so you can't afford it.
Well, it does have to be approved by the state, but it does have to be approved by the state, the increase. Okay. And again, the increases have not been quite as severe as they were back in the 90s and 2000s. But keep in mind, the one thing to keep in mind is that they're not quite as drastic as they were, because a lot of these insurance companies have raised the premiums considerably for any new applicants. So you're starting at a higher base as it is. But at least you do have partnership protection now available for the state of Illinois. So depending upon what kind of plan that you purchase, their partnership protection plan very well may cover or at least help you protect $200,000 of assets if you exhaust $200,000 of expenses when after you submit the claims to the insurance company.
Ron, do you want to take over on Zoom?
Thank you, Fred. Yes, we've got some questions. Don Packard is asking this question, and I'll add it something by someone else as well. Are all of the different plans that were being discussed, are they available from every insurer? And I guess it also would mean that a broker would need to look at the individual's needs and tailor what plan might be best for that person. So I'm just asking you to confirm that these plans are available from multiple insurers. And as an insurance broker, you would know, you would try to tailor the best plan for the best needs for that individual.
I do. I'm a certified financial planner. So one of the things that I do look at first and foremost is the person's need for income, the individual's amount of assets that they have, because the last thing that I want to do is have the individual end up paying more for the coverage than they can really afford to pay. So,
Okay.
and again, it also depends upon how much, again, based upon assets or based upon income that individual is going to need. Maybe they
Okay.
pay $300 or $400 a day, which is about $9,000 to $12,000 a month.
Right. Let me move to other question. Jeff is asking, care at home is less expensive and keeps the person safe, but there are limited opportunities for socialization. Wouldn't care at a facility be better in this regard to keep one's mind active? Now, that's more of a comment than a question, and I'm not sure it falls within your expertise on that.
It certainly would. I mean, we've certainly learned the benefits of people remaining socially connected during these times of COVID, in which we've
Okay.
all becoming increasingly isolated. So
Right.
it is critical in the sense that the more socially connected we are, the more our minds remain active, the happier we are, and the longer life we can live, and more importantly, the greater the quality of our life can be.
Okay.
Yeah, and the insurance companies will, again, that is something that they take into account. Many of them offer a concierge agent. And what the concierge agent does is when you submit the claim to the insurance company, they will set up an appointment with the one who is making the claim. And on the basis of that conversation, they will help that individual determine what kind of care is most appropriate.
Question came up. Why is ARP not a proponent of long-term care insurance, despite its reach into the senior community? And I'll add, is there any legislation being discussed in Washington that may help seniors in this area? In other words, looking at ARP as a proponent, and of course, our legislation tools in Washington, is there anything that is being explored that could be possibilities down the road?
I wasn't aware of the fact that ARP was not a proponent of long-term care insurance. As a matter of fact, I think I've seen some ads in which they have promoted New York Life as being a long-term care insurance company.
Okay.
That was the impression I've always had, is that AARP recommends long-term care insurance and actually had a company that they promoted. You'd have to look on their website, though. That would be a change. I'm not aware of any legislation in Washington, but I do know, like in Illinois, I mean, I'm on some committees that we talk about. Many times they're trying to increase the, like when Mark talked about the amount of money that the community spouse is able to keep an income basis, and then the $109,000 that the community spouse is able to keep. So there's constantly bills on that, and they're constantly talking about other states have done a better job, which is not a shocker that other states did a better job than Illinois, but other states have done a better job at having the spouse, I call it the spouse in the house, that the spouse that stays home, that they're not as indigent as other states, that give them more income and allow them to keep more assets. That's usually where, at least on a statewide level, I see some of that legislation.
Okay, well, thank you ever so much. We really appreciate it. Let's hear it.